It was a peaceful afternoon when the first strange events began. The sun hung low in the sky, casting golden light across the quiet fields that stretched out from the outskirts of the small town. People were going about their daily lives, unaware that in the far reaches of the galaxy, a great war was brewing, one that would change everything they knew about their world. Jonas had always been the type to mind his own business. Working on his family's farm, he was used to long days spent in solitude, tending to the animals and growing crops. The sound of wind brushing through the trees was often the only noise he would hear for hours. But that afternoon was different. Out of nowhere, a loud sound like thunder echoed across the sky. It wasn't the usual storm warning. No, this sound was different, almost unnatural. Jonas stopped what he was doing, looking up at the sky with a frown. He had never seen clouds like that before, dark, swirling, and menacing. A sense of unease began to stir in his stomach. The air suddenly felt heavier, as if the world itself was holding its breath. From the direction of the woods, something moved swiftly, too swiftly for a normal creature. Jonas squinted his eyes, trying to make sense of it. There were shapes, moving in the shadows, creatures that didn't belong in his world. Without warning, the ground trembled beneath him. It was as if the earth itself had been struck with a violent force. Birds flew into the air in panic, their shrieks cutting through the silence. Jonas barely had time to react before the first of the creatures appeared before him, its eyes glowing in the fading sunlight. It was a Vulpine, a creature of myth, thought to be nothing more than a legend. Yet there it stood, its fur dark as the night sky, its body slender and agile. Its claws gleamed like daggers, and its teeth were sharper than any animal Jonas had ever seen. But it wasn't its appearance that made Jonas freeze in place. It was the way it looked at him, like it knew him, like it had been waiting for him. Jonas took a step back, his mind racing. He had heard stories of the Vulpines from his grandfather, tales of fierce warriors who came from the stars. They were hunters, and they had a reputation for taking whatever they wanted. But the stories spoke only of the past. He didn't think they were real. But now, as the Vulpine slowly circled him, its eyes never leaving his, Jonas felt a chill run down his spine. He tried to speak, but his words caught in his throat. His heart pounded in his chest as the creature stopped in front of him, its face inches from his own. The Vulpine made a soft growl, as if assessing him, and then, in a voice that seemed to vibrate in the air, it spoke. "Mine," it said, its words sharp and clear. Before Jonas could react, the creature lunged, its teeth sinking into his arm with terrifying precision. He cried out in pain, trying to shake it off, but the Vulpine's grip was unyielding. As the creature's fangs pierced his flesh, a strange energy surged through his body. He felt a connection, a deep, unexplainable bond with the Vulpine. The pain was intense, but it was also followed by an odd sense of power, as if he had become one with the creature. His vision blurred for a moment, and he saw the world through its eyes, sharp, clear, and primal. The Vulpine released his arm, stepping back and looking at him with what could only be described as satisfaction. Jonas stumbled backward, his breath coming in ragged gasps, his heart still racing. He could feel the wound on his arm, but the pain had dulled, replaced by a strange warmth that spread through his body. "Mine," the Vulpine repeated, its voice calm now, almost gentle. "No one else will sit near you." Jonas could only watch in confusion as the creature turned and disappeared back into the woods, its presence fading like a shadow at dusk. His arm throbbed with the mark of the bite, and as he stood there, trying to process what had just happened, the reality of the situation began to sink in. The war had begun. The Vulpines were real. And somehow, Jonas was now tied to them in a way he couldn't understand. He had no idea what was coming next, but one thing was certain: his life was never going to be the same. The creatures of the stars had returned, and they were not here for peace. They were here for something far darker, something that would change everything Jonas had ever known. And he, for reasons unknown to him, was caught in the middle of it. As the shadows of night fell, Jonas could feel the weight of the world shifting, and he knew that he had just taken his first steps into a war unlike any other, a war where he might not have a place, a war that had only just begun. The days following the encounter with the Vulpine felt like a blur to Jonas. His mind struggled to come to terms with what had happened. The bite on his arm, though still tender, had begun to heal rapidly. In fact, it almost seemed as though the wound was closing before his eyes, leaving no trace of the vicious attack. The sensation of power that had coursed through him when the creature sank its teeth into his flesh was still fresh in his memory. It was unlike anything he had ever felt, unnatural, but strangely invigorating. But the most troubling part was the mark the Vulpine had left on him. It wasn't just a physical wound, it was something deeper, something that reached into the very core of his being. He couldn't explain it, but he could feel its presence constantly, like an invisible thread connecting him to the creature. It was as though it was watching him, waiting for something. Every time he closed his eyes, he could see the creature's glowing eyes staring back at him. It was no longer just a bite, it was a bond. Jonas had tried to talk to his family about what had happened, but the words stuck in his throat. They wouldn't believe him, not unless they saw it for themselves. And who would? Who could understand what he had experienced? The Vulpine, after all, were supposed to be nothing more than stories told around campfires, not flesh and blood creatures who roamed the woods and marked people as their own. The nights were the worst. Every time Jonas tried to sleep, he was haunted by strange dreams, visions of a vast war, of fire and smoke, and of countless Vulpines battling across the stars. It was as though he was seeing fragments of a war that had long since been forgotten, a war that was now unfolding before him. He woke in a cold sweat, heart racing, as though he had been part of the battle himself. As the days passed, Jonas grew more and more isolated. His friends kept their distance, as though they could sense the change in him, though they couldn't understand what had happened. He began to notice things he hadn't before, the way people would look at him with a mixture of fear and curiosity, as though they were sensing something he wasn't aware of. He had always been a quiet, humble farmer, but now it was as though a part of him had shifted. A part that was no longer human, no longer tethered to the simple life he had known. The power that the Vulpine had awakened within him was growing, like a fire that couldn't be contained. It was on the 6th day after the encounter that things took a darker turn. Jonas had been walking along the edge of the woods when he felt a strange pull, a tug deep within his chest. It was as if the very earth was calling him, urging him to follow. His heart began to race, and without thinking, he stepped into the forest. The trees loomed tall and silent, their twisted branches reaching out like the fingers of some forgotten god. The air felt thicker here, heavier, as if something was waiting, watching. Jonas didn't know what he was searching for, but he felt an overwhelming need to keep moving forward. His feet seemed to guide him, as though they knew the way. The further he ventured into the woods, the more he felt the presence of the Vulpine. It was as if the creature had somehow marked the land itself, leaving its imprint in the very soil. Suddenly, there was a rustling noise ahead of him. Jonas froze, his heart pounding in his chest. A figure emerged from the shadows, a Vulpine, but this one was different. It was larger, more imposing, its fur a dark shade of blue that shimmered in the dim light. Its eyes glowed with an intensity that seemed to pierce through Jonas's very soul. The creature studied him for a long moment, its gaze unwavering. Then, without a sound, it stepped forward, its sharp claws clicking against the ground as it moved closer. Jonas didn't move. He couldn't. He was paralyzed, caught in the grip of something he couldn't understand. The Vulpine stopped just in front of him, its eyes never leaving his. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then, in a voice that was both alien and familiar, it spoke. "Your mark grows stronger," it said. Its words were like a vibration in the air, reverberating in Jonas's chest. "The war calls to you." Jonas's breath caught in his throat. "What do you mean? What war?" The Vulpine's eyes gleamed as it tilted its head, as if considering. "The question. The war that has always been. The war between the stars. You are now part of it." Jonas's mind raced. The war between the stars? What did that mean? Had the Vulpines come to Earth to conquer it? To take it over? And why was he involved in this conflict? The creature stepped closer still, its presence overwhelming. Jonas could feel the energy crackling in the air, a strange force that both terrified and exhilarated him. "You are bound to us now," the Vulpine continued. "You are our chosen. You will fight or you will fall." The words hung in the air, heavy and foreboding. Jonas wanted to ask more, to understand what was happening, but the Vulpine was already turning away, disappearing into the shadows of the forest. Its final words echoed in his mind. "Prepare yourself." As the creature vanished, Jonas stood there, staring into the depths of the forest. The pull, that deep, insistent tug in his chest, was stronger than ever. He knew, with a certainty that shook him to his core, that his life was no longer his own. He had been marked by the Vulpine, and whatever lay ahead, whether he was ready for it or not, was now his fight to face. The war had truly begun. And Jonas was no longer just a farmer. He was a soldier in a battle that spanned the stars. The Cove. Days following his encounter with the Vulpine were a blur of strange sensations and growing unease. The mark on his arm, the one that had once felt like a minor wound, had become more prominent, glowing faintly at times as though it had a life of its own. It was a constant reminder of the strange bond between him and the Vulpines. The power he felt within him was growing, but so were the questions. The more he tried to ignore it, the louder the call became. Jonas had no choice but to listen. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting for him, that the war the Vulpine had spoken of was closer than he realized. His thoughts drifted constantly to the creature's words. "You are our chosen. You will fight or you will fall." What did that mean for him? He wasn't a fighter. He wasn't even a soldier. He was just a farm boy, a simple man who worked the land, who had never dreamed of anything more than a quiet life. But now he had been thrust into something much larger than himself. It had been a week since that strange encounter, and Jonas had been restless. He had tried to return to his normal routine, but it was impossible. His body seemed to hum with an energy he couldn't control. At times it was overwhelming, like his very soul was vibrating with some unknown force. But at other times, it was almost comforting, as if the bond with the Vulpine was something that had always been there, waiting for him to discover it. He decided to visit the village healer, an old woman named Marla, who was known for her knowledge of remedies and potions. She was also a bit of an outcast, someone who spoke in riddles and seemed to know more about the world than most people gave her credit for. "Marla," Jonas said as he entered her small cottage. The air was thick with the scent of herbs, and the flickering candlelight cast shadows on the walls. The old woman looked up from her work, her eyes sharp despite her age. "I need your help." Marla raised an eyebrow. "You look troubled." "Boy, sit down. Tell me what's bothering you." Jonas hesitated for a moment, then pulled up a chair. He couldn't hide the truth from her. There was something in her presence that made him feel like she could see right through him, to the core of his being. "I've been marked," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "By something or someone. I don't know what it is, but I can feel it. I feel like I'm part of something bigger than myself." Marla's expression softened, though there was a hint of knowing in her eyes. "A mark, you say? And you feel it calling to you?" Jonas nodded. "I don't know what it means." "There." was a creature of Vulpine. It attacked me, but when it bit me, I don't know how to explain it, but it felt like it was claiming me, binding me to it. Since then, I can't stop thinking about it. I can't stop feeling this strange power inside me. The healer studied him for a long moment, her ancient gaze never leaving his face. The Vulpine, she muttered under her breath. I thought the old stories were just that, stories. What do you mean? Jonas asked, his confusion deepening. The Vulpines are ancient creatures, far older than any human civilization. They are not from this world. They are starborn warriors who fight in a war that has raged across the galaxy for millennia. You've been marked by one of them, chosen by their people. But why me? Jonas asked. I'm just a farmer. I don't want any part in a war. I don't even know how to fight. Marla sighed deeply. It doesn't matter why. The Vulpines don't choose their warriors based on desire or skill. They choose based on something deeper, something tied to fate. Once they claim you, there's no turning back. You are bound to them now. Jonas sat back in his chair, his mind racing. He had always thought of himself as ordinary, too ordinary for anything special. But now, here he was, bound to a creature from the stars, caught up in a war he didn't understand. What kind of life was that? Marla seemed to sense his turmoil. You are not alone, Jonas. The Vulpines may be warriors, but they need more than just strength. They need someone who can stand against the darkness that is coming, and that is where you come in. Jonas blinked. What darkness? The darkness that has been gathering for years, she said, her voice growing low and somber. The Vulpines are not the only ones who've come from the stars. There are others, creatures more dangerous, more ruthless. They seek to conquer and destroy. They want to wipe out the Vulpines, and they will stop at nothing to do it. Jonas felt a chill run down his spine. So the Vulpines are fighting for survival? Marla nodded. Yes, and they cannot fight this war alone. They need you, Jonas. They need you to lead them, to fight for them. You are not just a mark, you are the key to their victory. Jonas stood up, feeling a surge of panic. I can't do this. I don't even know what I'm supposed to do. I'm not a soldier. Then you will learn, Marla said quietly. The war will teach you, but you cannot ignore the call. It will only grow louder, and soon you will have no choice but to answer. Jonas stared at the old woman, his heart pounding. The weight of her words hung heavily in the air, sinking into his bones. The Vulpine had claimed him, and now it seemed the universe itself was pushing him towards something he wasn't ready for. The war was coming, and Jonas knew whether he was ready or not, he would have to fight. He had been chosen, and his fate had already been sealed. The weight of the truth that Marla had shared with him pressed heavily on Jonas's chest. A part of him wanted to reject it, to believe it was all a dream or some twisted illusion. But another part of him, deep down, knew better. He had been marked, bound to the Vulpine, and whether he was prepared or not, the war had already begun. That night Jonas couldn't sleep. The strange energy inside him pulsed and vibrated beneath his skin, a constant reminder of the bond that had been forged. His mind kept racing, replaying the words of Marla and the Vulpine. You are the key to their victory. What did that mean? What role could he possibly play in this galactic war? He was just a farmer, a simple man who had never trained for battle, let alone led a charge against an alien enemy. The thought of fighting terrified him, but more than that, the idea of being a soldier in a war he didn't understand filled him with dread. As the hours passed, Jonas finally gave in to the pull that seemed to tug at him from deep within. He didn't understand why, but he knew he couldn't ignore it any longer. He had to face whatever it was that was coming for him and for the Vulpines. The next morning, Jonas made his way back to the woods, the same woods where he had first encountered the Vulpine. There, the air was thick with tension. Every step he took felt like it led him deeper into an unknown world, a world that was both alien and familiar. His arm throbbed with the mark, the faint glow of the Vulpine's bite pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. He wasn't sure what he was looking for, but he knew he had to keep moving. The forest was eerily silent, the usual sounds of birds and animals absent. It felt as though something was waiting, watching, ready to strike. Jonas's heart raced as he walked deeper into the woods. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw movement. His body tensed, his instincts on high alert. A shape darted between the trees, too fast for him to see clearly. His breath caught in his throat as he instinctively followed. The shape led him to a clearing, and there, standing in the middle of the open space, was the Vulpine this time. It was not alone. Two others, both larger than the first, stood beside it, their glowing eyes locked onto Jonas the moment he stepped into the clearing. He froze, unsure of what to do. The creatures were silent, their eyes filled with a mixture of wariness and something else, something that Jonas couldn't place. The first Vulpine, the one that had marked him, stepped forward. Its voice echoed in Jonas's mind, as clear as if it were speaking aloud. "You have come. It is time for you to understand." Jonas swallowed hard, trying to steady his racing pulse. Understand what? The Vulpine moved closer, its steps slow and deliberate. The war. The battle. You have been chosen for. Suddenly, one of the larger Vulpines lunged toward Jonas. He barely had time to react, instinctively raising his arm to defend himself. But the creature stopped just inches from him, its claws mere centimeters from his skin. The air between them crackled with energy, and Jonas felt a surge of power, raw and untamed, filling his veins. He didn't know how, but he felt it. He was in control. The Vulpine pulled back, its eyes wide with something like surprise. Then, it tilted its head and gave a low, approving growl. "You are ready." Jonas stared at it, still in shock. Ready for what? The first Vulpine moved toward him, circling him as though inspecting him. "We will teach you. You will learn how to fight, how to harness the power within you. Only then will you understand your place in the war." Jonas looked around at the creatures, a sense of fear gripping him. He had no idea what they were talking about, but one thing was clear. They were preparing him for something far beyond his understanding. The Vulpine paused in front of him, its piercing gaze locking onto his. The first test will begin now. Before Jonas could react, the air around him seemed to shift. The very forest seemed to darken, the sunlight dimming as a thick fog rolled in. The temperature dropped, and the sounds of the forest faded into an oppressive silence. The Vulpine backed away, their eyes glowing brighter in the darkening surroundings. Then, from the fog, shapes began to emerge, more creatures, tall and shadowy, with eyes that gleamed red in the mist. Jonas's heart skipped a beat. These weren't Vulpines. The creatures advanced, their movements swift and fluid, like predators closing in on their prey. Jonas instinctively took a step back, but the Vulpine didn't let him retreat. "Fight. Use the power inside you," the Vulpine ordered, its voice cutting through the air. Jonas's hands shook as the creatures drew nearer. His mind raced. He didn't know how to fight. He didn't even know where to start. But then, something inside him stirred, something primal, something that came from deep within. The Vulpine had marked him, and now the power they had given him was surging, unstoppable. Without thinking, Jonas raised his arms, and the energy inside him exploded outward. A wave of force shot from his body, sending the shadowy creatures stumbling back. The creatures growled, but they didn't retreat. They regrouped, and the attack began again. But this time, Jonas could feel it. He was in control. His instincts, sharpened by the Vulpine's bite, guided his movements. He ducked, dodged, and countered with an intensity he didn't know he possessed. His body moved with fluid grace, responding to the fight as if it had always known how to. With each strike, each movement, the creatures faltered. Jonas's confidence grew. He was no longer just a man in the woods. He was a warrior. The power the Vulpine had awakened within him had transformed him, and he could feel the war calling him louder than ever. The shadowy creatures finally retreated into the mist, their red eyes fading into the fog. Jonas stood in the clearing, his chest heaving as the energy inside him slowly ebbed. The Vulpines circled him once more, their eyes filled with something like approval. "You are ready," the first Vulpine said. "This was only the beginning. The war is upon us. And you, Jonas, have a role to play in it." Jonas stood tall, his body humming with the power of the battle. The first test was over, and he had passed. But deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. The war had begun, and he was ready to face it. Jonas stood in the clearing, his breathing slow but steady. As the last of the shadowy creatures vanished into the mist, the air was still, the forest eerily silent once again. His heart raced with the adrenaline of the fight, his mind spinning with the reality of what had just transpired. The creatures that had attacked him, were they part of the war the Vulpines had spoken of? And if so, what did it mean for the world he had known? He turned to face the Vulpine, who stood just a few paces away. The creature's eyes gleamed with something close to approval, but there was a hint of something else, something darker, more urgent. "You have done well," the Vulpine said, its voice calm yet commanding. "But this was only the first test. The true war is coming, and it will be unlike anything you've experienced. The creatures you faced today were only scouts, sent to test your abilities. There are far worse things waiting for us, Jonas." Jonas swallowed hard. He had already seen more than he ever thought possible, but he knew the Vulpine wasn't lying. He felt it, the weight of the war, the intensity of what was to come. And despite the fear gnawing at his stomach, there was something else too, a sense of purpose. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight to protect something far greater. "What do we do next?" Jonas asked, his voice stronger. Then he felt the Vulpine tilted its head, studying him. "Next we gather. The Vulpines are scattered, hidden in different places across the world. They do not trust easily, and we will need every warrior we can find. But first, we must learn what we are truly up against." Jonas's mind raced. He had assumed the Vulpines were the only ones involved in the war, but now it seemed there was more, something bigger, something more dangerous. "What exactly are we facing?" he asked, his voice tight. The Vulpine's expression darkened, its gaze distant. "The other creatures are called the Harbingers. They come from the same distant stars, but unlike the Vulpines, they are not interested in balance or survival. The Harbingers are conquerors. Their goal is to dominate, to wipe out any who stand in their way. They seek to bend all worlds too. Their will, and they have no mercy." Jonas felt a chill creep down his spine. The creatures he had fought in the woods were nothing compared to what the Vulpines were describing. "And they're coming here?" "Yes," the Vulpine answered, its voice low. "The first wave will arrive soon. And we will not be able to fight them alone. That is why you must prepare. We all must." Jonas looked at the creature, his mind struggling to keep up. "I don't know how to prepare. I don't even know what I'm doing." The Vulpine moved closer, its presence overwhelming, but there was a softness in its eyes now. "You are not alone in this. We will train. Guide you. You will learn how to harness your abilities, to fight alongside us. And you will lead. We chose you for a reason, Jonas. You have something within you that we need." Jonas felt the weight of its words, but at the same time, there was a flicker of something deep inside him. Something he hadn't realized was there until now. "What is it that you need from me?" The Vulpine paused, as though contemplating the question. "You are more than just a soldier. You are a bridge, a connection between our worlds. The mark you bear is not just a symbol of our bond, it is a key. The key that will allow us to unite the scattered Vulpines and fight the Harbingers as one. Jonas blinked. A key? The Vulpine nodded. Yes, but you must understand, the mark on your arm is not just a gift, it is a responsibility. It ties you to the Vulpines, to the war, and to all those who fight beside us. You must choose whether to lead us in battle or to let the war consume you. There is no turning back once you make that choice. Jonas felt a knot tighten in his chest. And if I choose wrong? The Vulpine's gaze softened. There are no wrong choices, Jonas, but some choices will cost you more than others. You will make mistakes, you will suffer. But in the end, you will either stand victorious or fall with us. Jonas took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his responsibility settle on his shoulders. This was no longer just about survival. This was about something bigger, something that could change the fate of worlds. He wasn't just a farmer anymore. He was part of a battle that stretched across the stars, and he had to be ready. What do we do now? Jonas asked, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside him. The Vulpine regarded him for a moment before answering. Now we gather. We find the others, the warriors who will join us in the fight. You will lead them, Jonas. You are our key. And together we will fight to ensure the survival of all we hold dear. Jonas nodded, feeling a surge of determination rise within him. The road ahead would be hard, and the challenges would be unlike anything he had ever faced. But he knew one thing for sure, he couldn't run anymore. The war had already come to him, and now it was up to him to stand and fight. As the Vulpine turned to leave the clearing, Jonas followed. The world around him had changed. And so had he. The gathering storm was on the horizon, and Jonas would face it head-on. The first step had been taken. Now there was no turning back. The days blurred into each other as Jonas traveled with the Vulpine, moving deeper into the heart of the war. They didn't speak much, Jonas and the creature, yet he could feel the bond between them grow stronger. With each passing day, the power within him, still wild and untamed, pulsed with the rhythm of the world around him. It was as if the very air was charged with anticipation. The calm before a great storm. They moved swiftly, staying off the beaten paths, relying on the shadows to cloak their presence. Jonas had no idea where they were going, but the Vulpine seemed to know, guiding him through dense forests, across barren fields, and into hidden valleys. With every step, Jonas could feel the weight of his mission bearing down on him. His mind often wandered back to the training he had begun to undergo. It wasn't conventional. The Vulpines didn't waste time with formal lessons or explanations. They showed him the art of combat in the most primal way through instinct and experience. There were no words, only actions. No charts or instructions. Just the raw power of the Vulpines and the burning desire to survive. In the beginning, Jonas had struggled to keep up. His body, once soft from a life spent working the land, was now learning the hard edges of warfare. He trained with the Vulpines, sparring with them day and night. His body ached, bruises blooming across his skin, but with every battle, he grew stronger. And with every lesson, he understood more. One night, after a particularly grueling training session, Jonas sat by a campfire, nursing his wounds. The Vulpine, who had been silent as ever, stood at the edge of the firelight, watching him. It was a strange sensation, being this close to a creature so otherworldly, yet so familiar in its presence. The bond they shared felt like a constant, an invisible tether between them, guiding him, pushing him forward. The creature spoke after a long silence, its voice low and steady. The first wave is coming, Jonas. The harbingers are near. They will not wait much longer. Jonas nodded, the weight of the words sinking into his chest. It had been a week since their last encounter with the shadowy creatures. He had fought, and he had learned. But this was different. This wasn't just training anymore. This was real. The war was no longer something distant, it was closing in on him. What happens when they come? Jonas asked, his voice steady despite the storm of nerves inside him. The Vulpine's eyes gleamed. When they come, we will fight. You will lead. You are the key to our victory, Jonas. It is time to gather the others. Jonas looked up sharply. Others? More Vulpines? Yes, the Vulpine replied. There are Vulpine warriors scattered across the world and hiding. They do not trust easily, and some may be reluctant to join the fight. But you, the creature paused and stepped closer, its eyes never leaving his. You will bring them. Together, you will unite us. And when the harbingers arrive, we will stand as one. Jonas's heart pounded in his chest. This wasn't just about fighting for survival anymore. It was about leadership. About bringing together a force capable of taking on the greatest threat the universe had ever known. How do I find them? The Vulpine tilted its head. You have already started. The mark you bear is not just a symbol, it is a signal. A beacon. Those who are meant to fight with us will come. You need only be patient. The war will find them, just as it has found you. Jonas took a deep breath. He had never asked for any of this, but now he was standing at the edge of something far greater than himself. The weight of his destiny pressed down on him, but deep within him, a flicker of resolve burned brighter than ever. That night, as he lay under the stars, sleep refused to come. His mind kept replaying the events of the past few days, the battles, the training, and the words of the Vulpine. He was more than just a soldier now. He was a leader. The burden of that thought filled him with uncertainty, but it also fueled a strange determination. The next morning, they set out once more. The air was thick with the promise of something imminent. The Vulpine was silent as it led the way, its movements swift and graceful. Jonas followed closely, his mind a whirlwind of questions and doubts. How could he lead? What did the others expect of him? Would he be able to unite the scattered Vulpines in time? As they traveled, the world around them began to change. The once peaceful landscapes now felt tense, as though something was shifting beneath the surface. The trees seemed to loom larger, their branches reaching out like the fingers of unseen hands. The wind carried an unfamiliar chill, and the sky, though clear, seemed to be darkening with each passing hour. They arrived at a small hidden settlement deep in the mountains by the time dusk fell. The Vulpine led Jonas to a cave entrance, one that had been hidden by the dense foliage. As they stepped inside, Jonas felt the air shift. There was something ancient about this place, a sense of power that filled the very walls of the cave. Inside, Jonas could feel the presence of others. More Vulpines. But they were not the same as the one who had guided him. These Vulpines were older, their fur lighter in color, their eyes sharper, filled with the wisdom and weight of many battles. They stared at Jonas with curiosity and wariness. The Vulpine that had been with Jonas stepped forward, its voice firm and commanding. "This is Jonas," it said. "The one I spoke of, the one who will lead us." The others exchanged glances, some skeptical, others intrigued. Jonas felt a wave of doubt rise within him, but he pushed it down. He had no choice now but to face the truth. He was the one they were waiting for. He was their leader. As the Vulpines gathered around, Jonas felt the weight of their expectations pressing on him. This was no longer just a fight for survival, it was a call to arms, a fight for everything they held dear. "The war is coming," Jonas said, his voice steady but full of resolve. "And we will fight, together. We will face the harbingers, and we will win." The room fell silent for a moment, then one by one, the Vulpines nodded in agreement. The first step had been taken. The war was no longer just a distant threat. It was real, and Jonas was ready. The gathering storm had arrived, and now, Jonas would lead the charge. The time had come. The Vulpine warriors, those scattered across the land and brought together by Jonas, were finally united. The power of their bond, strengthened by Jonas's leadership, pulsed through them like a living thing. The cave where they had gathered, now filled with the heavy tension of what lay ahead, was quiet, as though the world itself was waiting for the coming battle. Jonas stood at the front of the group, looking out over the rugged landscape that lay beyond the cave. The sun had begun to set, casting long shadows across the mountains, and the air felt thick with the promise of impending conflict. His mind raced with the weight of his responsibility. He was no longer just a farmer or a confused young man pulled into a war he didn't understand. He was a leader now, the key to the Vulpine's survival. And the Harbingers were coming. The Vulpines stood behind him, their eyes glowing with determination. There were dozens of them now, all united under Jonas's command, all bound by the same cause. They had trained together, fought together, and now they were ready. The war had reached its breaking point. There was no turning back. "Are we ready?" Jonas asked, his voice steady but filled with a quiet urgency. The Vulpine at his side, the one who had guided him from the start, stepped forward. "We are ready, Jonas. We have waited for this moment. We fight for survival, for our people, and for the future of the world you call home." Jonas nodded. "Then let's do this, for all of us." The Vulpine warriors let out a low, unified growl, a sound that reverberated through the mountains. They were not just fighting for their own survival anymore. They were fighting for the future, for the balance of the universe itself. As they began their march down from the mountains, Jonas could feel the pulse of the battle in his veins. The mark on his arm, which had once been a mere wound, now burned with a fierce intensity. It was more than a symbol of the bond between him and the Vulpines. It was a reminder of everything that was at stake. The war was no longer a distant reality. It was here now, and Jonas was the one who would lead the charge. The journey to the battlefield was long, but as they neared the site, the landscape began to shift. The air grew colder, and the ground beneath them became uneven and barren, as if it had been scarred by years of conflict. The Harbingers had already left their mark on this land. The final battle would take place here on the edge of destruction. Jonas stood at the head of the group, his eyes scanning the horizon. In the distance, he saw movement shapes in the mist. The Harbingers. They had arrived. The creatures that emerged from the mist were unlike anything Jonas had ever seen. Towering, menacing figures with skin like stone and eyes that burned with an unholy fire. They were massive, their shapes twisted and monstrous, yet there was a cold intelligence in their gaze. The Harbingers had come to conquer, to destroy. Jonas's heart pounded in his chest as he turned to the Vulpines behind him. "This is it," he said, his voice unwavering. "We fight or we die, but we will not go quietly." The Vulpines growled in agreement, their fangs bared, their bodies coiled with ready energy. With a sharp, commanding motion, Jonas raised his arm, signaling the charge. The Vulpines surged forward, their powerful bodies moving with incredible speed and precision. The clash of battle began almost immediately, the roar of the Vulpines echoing through the air as they met the Harbingers head-on. Jonas fought alongside them, his instincts now fully aligned with the Vulpines. The power inside him surged with every strike, every movement. His body had transformed into a weapon, as if he had become one with the energy of the battle itself. He fought with a fierce determination that he hadn't known he was capable of, driven, not just by the need for survival, but by something deeper, something ancient that called to him through the Vulpine bond. But the Harbingers were relentless. They fought with a cold, calculated precision, their strength overwhelming. Jonas could see the Vulpines falling one by one, their bodies torn by the brutality of the enemy. But they did not falter. They did not give up. The battle raged on, a furious storm of violence and chaos. Then, in the thick of the fight, Jonas saw something that struck him to his core. One of the Harbingers, larger than the others, broke through the lines. It moved with terrifying speed. Its eyes locked on Jonas. There was a primal intelligence in its gaze, and Jonas knew this creature was not just a soldier, it was their leader. The harbinger who had come to lead the invasion, with a cry of rage. The harbinger charged toward Jonas, its massive form closing in on him. Jonas barely had time to react. His instincts kicked in, and he met the creature head-on, his fists raised, ready to strike. But the harbinger was faster, its claws slashing through the air with deadly intent. Jonas barely dodged the first strike, but the second caught him across the chest, sending him crashing to the ground. Pain exploded in his body, and for a moment, he couldn't move. Blood poured from the wound, but in the next instant, he felt the surge of power, the bond with the Vulpine strengthening within him. With a roar, Jonas pushed himself to his feet, his arms blazing with energy. The mark on his arm burned hotter than ever before, its power flooding his body, filling him with an unstoppable force. "No," Jonas muttered, his voice raw with determination. "I will not fall." With one final powerful push, Jonas charged at the harbinger. The creature swung its claws at him, but Jonas anticipated the move, ducking and striking with the force of the Vulpines behind him. His fist connected with the harbinger's chest, sending it reeling. The energy within him exploded outward, and with a final devastating blow, Jonas struck the harbinger down. The battle fell into a sudden silence. The remaining harbingers looked around at their fallen leader and the Vulpines who stood, bloodied but unbroken. And in that moment, Jonas felt it, the power of the bond, the strength of the warriors who had fought beside him, the knowledge that they had not just survived, but triumphed. The war was far from over, but this battle was theirs. And Jonas, the key to their survival, had led them to victory. As the last of the harbingers fled into the mist, Jonas stood tall, his body aching but his spirit burning with a fierce pride. They had won, but this was only the beginning. The Vulpines had returned, and with Jonas as their leader, they would face whatever came next. The universe had been changed forever, and Jonas had become more than just a man. He had become the bridge between worlds, a warrior, a leader, and the hope for all that was yet to come. The final stand had been fought, and the Vulpines would rise again.